Hello guys, welcome to the channel, and thanks to G2A for sponsoring the channel. There is a reference link in the description below. As per the fan-voted catchphrase of my channel, that's what you're going to get every single time. So, patch 3.3. It's big. And when I say it's big, I'm telling you it's 39 pages. 39 pages worth of notes. So, if we go through them relatively quickly, it is because there is so much to talk about that this could very easily be a 3-hour video. So I'm basically not going to waste any time here. Let's go straight into it. There is going to be an ARAM progression track. So basically, you'll be able to see how you do in ARAMs, and there'll be scores, and you'll get some rewards based on your ARAMs, which is great because I bloody love ARAMs, and whenever I'm trying to detail from ranked, it's always ARAMs for me. So I'm pretty excited to see that starting. I think it's coinciding with the start of the new season on July the 16th. Controls. There is a new control which I would actually recommend activating. Essentially, it's called on button down. So any non-targeted spells. So I'm thinking, I'm talking things like Trindamir's Q, or like, I don't know, Trindamir's W. I can only think of Trindamir right now. But anything that doesn't require a target is like a self buff, or is, like Tristana's Q as well. You can activate it as soon as you tap the button rather than when you lift your finger off the button, which basically means you can cast it slightly quicker. So I'd recommend giving it a go and seeing how you feel about it. Of course, the big change coming is Elemental Rift. So there was loads of Elemental Rift changes. I'm sure you guys played through the game modes, and they have settled on this version. They are removing Cloud Dragon, and you will have Infernal, Mountain, and Ocean Dragon, of which, when you take the first one at 5 minutes, it will cause the map to change. Now, any of you that are familiar with League PC will know what this looks like, to an extent. But this is coming to Wildrift. If the Infernal Dragon is first, it burns away brushes and also removes some walls in the jungle, etc. Mountain is basically the opposite. It causes extra walls to come out and give you more protection through walls. And Ocean creates more brushes, and you also get more honey fruit around the map to give yourself some more sustain. So those are the major changes. What is then going to happen is that each dragon will spawn in a random, non-identical order. So basically what it means is that I think that every single one of these dragons will appear throughout the duration of the game. You can't, like in League PC, get like, 2 Infernals because that's the one that's spawning for Soul. If you take Infernal first, it will not be Infernal second, and it will be Mountain or Ocean. And if you take that one, the last one will be the remaining dragon. After that, at 20 minutes, something called the Elder Dragon spawns, which is a really, really, really powerful dragon, which gives you a ridiculous buff, which basically automatically causes you to win any team fight that you participate in. So we're going to talk a little bit about what those stats are. Okay, so the more dragons you get, the more powerful all of their buffs become. If I'm reading this correctly, this is how it is, and feel free to correct me, but you take your first dragon, be it Infernal, Mountain, or Ocean, and you're going to get the leftmost stats. So let's use Infernal because it's the easiest. You'll get 4% attack damage and ability power. You take the next dragon, which is going to be Mountain or Ocean, that upgrades to 8%. And if you take all 3, you get 12% attack damage and ability power. You also get a crap ton of resistances from Mountain Dragon, and Ocean Dragon gives you a huge amount of missing health regeneration. TLDR, dragons are giga powerful, and I think worth fighting for as a major win condition. The more dragons you get, the more powerful you're going to become as a team, and so they become, I think, a really important thing to focus on. Elder Dragon. Damaging an enemy causes them to burn for 60 true damage per second for 3 seconds. So that's 180 true damage just for damaging them. So that's a burn. Dealing damage with champion abilities, basic attacks, or Elder Dragon burn to enemy below 15% health will instantly execute them, and it will ignore shields, but will not affect targets who are invulnerable or immune to death, like Trindamir, using him as a lot of examples right now. When Elder Dragon is slain, it grants that buff to all living members of your team for 2 minutes or until champion death. This is a teamfight auto win. If you get Elder Dragon, you can often turn games around when you're massively behind, because a 15% health execute is absolutely nutty. Really insane. So yeah, it's such an important objective to focus on, and at 20 minutes, it probably will become the game-defining objective. You know, Baron, I think, will still be important, of course, but this is going to throw some questions as to which one is much more important for sort of ending the game. Spawning non-repeating random elemental dragons. So yeah, that is what I think it was. They respawn every 5 minutes. There's a couple of things about when elemental dragon will despawn, but they despawn at 19 minutes. But if you're in combat with it, it won't despawn until 19 minutes 30. And the Elder Dragon is on a 4-minute respawn timer. So it's actually on a quicker respawn timer because they really, really, really want you to end the game post 20 minutes. Kind of excited to see how this one's coming in. This one's coming in tonight. So once the patch is out, this will be out. Ranked season. So major changes to ranked, which is pretty crazy. Major changes to ranked. So ranked marks will now extend all the way to Challenger. Once you reach Diamond, instead of gaining and losing victory points or VP, you will gain marks. To progress through Diamond, you're going to need to earn 6 marks per tier. So Diamond 4, 6 marks, Diamond 3, 6 marks, etc. You'll now need to get 20 marks to fulfill the rank requirements to be promoted to Grandmaster. So you'll get to Master, and then you'll need to get 20 marks to get to Grandmaster, which is about the equivalent of 200 VP, which it is now, at 10 VP a win. And of course, it is apart from the sorry, just a horrible sound. Apart from the fortitude system, it is essentially a win-loss, 50-50 all the way up type situation, which does mean that if you have a close to 50% win rate, it is very unlikely that you're going to travel up the ranks as you did previously. You will need to have a higher win rate in general now, probably around 54-55%, to make it easily towards Master and beyond. I would say that marks are much more unforgiving, and it really depends on, I mean, I will caveat this point with, it depends on how much fortitude you need to get a loss prevented and how much fortitude you generate, you know, per win. But ultimately, marks are basically plus 10 minus 10 LP, because it's the same thing. You go up the same amount that you go down. Whereas with VP, obviously, when I was climbing through Diamond, I was getting plus 18 minus 11. So I was basically getting 1.5 wins for every loss, which meant that even at a 50% win ratio, I was naturally at essentially a 60% win ratio, or 66% win ratio. You'll need 40 marks to fulfill the rank requirements to be promoted to Challenger. It says at least 20 marks and at least 40 marks. I'm wondering whether there is going to be a cap on the number of challengers and the number of Grandmasters, because at least 40 marks, obviously I assume Challenger is still going to be the top 200, so that could be higher. So that probably, you know, depending on how much people play normal solo queue, that could be 60 or 70, basically. All right, sorry, where did we get to? My son came home really early from nursery, so... yeah, I think we were talking about the fact that... You might need 40, but you could also need more if they're keeping it to like top 200 or top 300 on the server. And they're removing placement matches at the beginning of the ranked experience. Since we're implementing a lot of new changes, our usual season reset will roll ranks back a bit further than the previous season to help smooth the transition into these updated ranks. Now, what I know from some leaks is that... So for what I know from leaks, sorry, is that high elos are not going to be affected by this, but lower elos are going to be rolled back a bit further. Which means if you're in Master, Challenger, Grandmaster, you should be getting about the same level of reset, whereas lower ranks are going to get slightly rolled back further. And Season 6 begins in 3 days. So you're going to have 2 days of Elemental Rift on your old rank to get used to it. Legendary queue. A few weeks, and this is the new solo queue only mode. So essentially, I've kind of talked about this in a previous video, but solo queue only mode is going to be only available for Diamond Plus players. They're not implementing it straight away, and it's going to be only open for a certain number of hours per day. There's going to be 6 new ranks: Warrior 4-1, Commander 4-1, Guardian 4-1, Vanquisher 4-1, Immortal 4-1, and Legend. That's a lot of ranks for you to have to climb through, and you have to get to Diamond to even be eligible. I'm wondering what I think it's all VP gain, it's not marks. I'm wondering what the VP gain is going to look like in this mode, because if you only have a certain number of hours to play per day, and it follows the same system as the normal ranked season, like if you're getting like 10 LP a win, you're never going to get to legend because it's going to take forever, or you'll have to play literally every night. You'll get a global ranking on the leaderboard alongside other players who are able to reach legend. So not only will you be able to compare yourself to your region, you'll be able to compare yourself to every other region in the world, which is pretty exciting. There's going to be a separate MMR rating for this queue. So your current rank in normal ranked mode is not going to influence sort of the MMR for this ranked mode. And you'll also have a load of exclusive rewards that you'll be able to get. They're basically going to find out when most people are playing and implement this queue when the most high elo people are playing. Not only is that supposed to increase the effectiveness of matchmaking, but also mean that the queue times will be shorter for this mode. Because ultimately, when you introduce a new mode like this, you're going to split the current ranked user base, which does mean if you're trying to play normal ranked at like Diamond Plus at this level, you're probably going to find the matchmaking in that queue gets a little worse during this mode. But it's exciting, and I think the way of having a limited time mode that's only open for a certain period of time per day will give people a really, really good ranked experience that they can probably be really happy about. My genuine thought is that this is not going to solve the problems that a lot of people on social media are vocal about, primarily because it's still solo queue, and you're still going to run into people feeding, you're still going to run into people going AFK. It's still going to be a bit of a crap shot in terms of what it actually feels like to play. However, what I will say is you won't run into ridiculous trio versus trio matching or duo versus duo matching, because sometimes ranked right now kind of feels like whoever's got the better trio queue wins, or whoever's got the better duo queue wins. This is going to make it level playing field in terms of like it's everyone for themselves. Everyone is solo, so there is no particular connection for anyone on the team, which I think will be a good thing overall. Right, everyone, I have the kids with me as Emily's gone to work. So there's a wild pass update. Karma is the skin. It's pretty cool. I realise you actually can't see one of the children. Rupert's over there. This is Arthur. Aren't you, Rupert? He's watching car videos right now. He likes car videos. Star Guardian event. I've seen some teasing for this on social media. Looks pretty cool. Here we go. Champion changes. So apologies if you can hear stuff in the background. That's just car video noises. I don't know if it's coming through. It might be too far away from the microphone. Ahri. So, Ahri had a relatively big rework on the PC, and it proved very successful. So successful that Ahri made her way into pro play for the first time in a very long time. TLDR. Ahri gains essence theft whenever she hits an enemy with an ability, stacking it up to 3 times. At 3 stacks, her next ability consumes all stacks to heal her for a flat amount plus ability power. Whenever Ahri scores a champion takedown, within 3 seconds of damaging them, she consumes her essence to heal herself for a decent amount of HP and ability power. So Ahri basically has an insane amount of healing resets in her kit now. So essentially, she, like very much kind of like her thematic, she absorbs their essence and gets a load of life back, which is really, 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 really cool. And actually is going to make her very powerful in teamfight situations, and actually helps her in teamfights because she does rely on playing out the longer teamfights and having, you know, the mobility to avoid a lot of damage. This is going to help her kind of play with her mobility to be a bit more effective in teamfights overall. It improved the logic of Foxfire projectile. I assume this is, you know, targeting champions versus targeting minions. Charm removed. Enemies hit by charm take 20% more damage from Ahri's abilities for 5 seconds. This was pretty good, but ultimately most of the time this was a charm plus a spirit orb. So you'd often have charm plus spirit orb, and that was basically what you got from that. But they're removing that now to make way for her new ultimate, which is Spirit Rush. If Ahri procs her passive and absorbs an essence of a champion, she will extend Spirit Rush's recast duration by 10 seconds, which means she has way more time to recast it and use it. And she gains an extra charge of Spirit Rush, storing up to 3 charges. So you have to remember that you can get this infinitely in a team fight. You can keep getting Spirit Rush, but you can only ever store a maximum of 3 charges. So if you If you have 2 charges and you steal another charge from killing an enemy, you need to then use another one before you kill another enemy, otherwise you'll waste one of these charges. The initial duration is 12 seconds, but obviously this can be extended for a significant amount of time, which means that Ahri can ultimately get a huge amount of mobility. Think of her a little bit like a ranged mage Katarina. Okay, so that's pretty cool. I'm looking forward to the Ahri rework. I think it is going to make her a very high tier pick. I think you're going to see her in solo queue all the time. I think she probably will be. She was already relatively good. Like, I play Ahri. She doesn't have many bad matchups, for instance. But I think this is going to make Ahri very high tier, if I'm honest with you. Annie is strong for a lot of players, but there's some part of her kit that could use some improvements. They're increasing... we're cutting away some of the form in base stats, but increasing the power and utility of Disintegrate. Lower base speed... and lower armor per level. Well, armor per level doesn't really matter massively. I think, like, Annie has always been quite squishy, so if you have an AD bruiser get onto you or an AD assassin, like, most of the time you were probably dead if they were in, like, melee range. But the movement speed can be a bit of a nuisance, because obviously, like, 5 movement speed was pretty good. You know, it might be the difference maker between getting you into position for, like, a flash Tibbers or a proto-belt Tibbers. Sorry, I've got an ulcer on this tonsil. You don't need to know that, but it's very painful when I talk. Projectile speed increased by 20%, and explosion radius increased by 0.25, which is about 33%. So essentially increasing the range of Disintegrate, and also, or rather increasing the explosion radius when it hits something, and also increasing the projectile speed, making it slightly easier to hit on target. So it's not going to be as slow, less easy to flash away from, and also does a little bit more damage in an area when it hits something, which is pretty cool. Small amount of utility and usability increase for Annie. Diana is pretty strong. Yeah, I think most people consider Diana pretty strong, but they're reducing Lunar Rush base damage by 10. Might not seem like a lot, but you've got to remember, when Diana uses her ultimate in a team fight, she applies Moonlight to basically everybody and just keeps Lunar dashing all over the place. So this will cut down some of her damage across multiple targets in a teamfight situation, but ultimately not a big deal breaker. It might make her slightly lower tier, but I'm not expecting this to massively kick Diana out of the meta. Dr. Mundo. This is a really cool change. Basically, they're changing his ultimate so that when he clicks it, when he taps it, he doesn't get a heal. His maximum health just increases for the duration of the ultimate. So it means that things like Grievous Wounds don't completely destroy Mundo's ultimate. You'll get a burst of healing by increasing your maximum health, and then the healing, because the maximum health has increased, you're also going to get an increased amount of healing from the second part of the ultimate, which is obviously going to then, even when affected by Grievous Wounds, give you a little bit more healing overall. So it's a really, really good change. And whether it is good enough to bring Mundo back into the meta, I'm not sure. But it certainly is a good way of, you know, making it so that Mundo's not completely 100% countered by Grievous Wounds, and has a little bit of wiggle room if someone picks up an early, you know, like Mortal Reminder or something, or Oblivion Orb. Galio, we're making it a bit easier to approach your foes while charging Shield of Durand. And giving Galio a bit more durability so we can take those riskier engagements. Base stats going up, so he's getting about 130 or 140 more health at level 15, and the movement speed reduction when charging your taunt is going down by 10%. So you're going to be slightly quicker when you're charging your shield, which is pretty good because in teamfight situations it might help you reposition just a little bit more. So really nice changes for Galio, and might bring him a little bit more readily back into the meta. Now, in pro play, he was already seeing a decent amount of player icons, so I expect that he'll still see play at the pro level. But ultimately, I think, you know, Galio needed this love. The change that they made to his Shield of Durand by increasing the charge up duration did make Galio feel quite clunky. So this is quite nice, and it will allow him to get into position a little bit more effectively when charging that ultimate. The way I think about it is it's de facto kind of undoing the channel duration, because one of the things that I'll try and explain it in an easy way. I don't know how easy this is going to be. Old Galio, you were slower, but you had a quicker charge up, right? So if enemy was trying to run away from you, even though you were slower, you were charging your shield more quickly, so therefore you were able to catch them in the circle. Now you charge the shield slower, but you're quicker. so you can keep pace with the person running away a bit more effectively and hopefully catch them in the slightly slower charge up on the shield. They kind of do the same thing. It's basically the way that I look at it. It's kind of doing the same thing. Jax is apparently OP, and he is going to get absolutely like donked in the jungle, like completely donked in the jungle. There's no way that he's even going to be like remotely viable here. His base damage is going up, and his relentless assault is getting changed. I think it stacks to 10 right now, but it's going down from 10 to 5. They're essentially doubling. What's wrong, Rupert? I love you too, darling. They're essentially doubling the percentage per stack. So really, you're not going to notice too much difference because you doubled those stacks on minions and champions anyway. So you'd usually only need 5 hits on minions and champions to get to 10. Now it's coming down to 5, so you still only need 5 hits. It's going to be slightly better in the late game, but you're not going to really feel it in the early game. However, no longer effective on monsters. Jax is not going to get an attack speed increase on monsters in the jungle, which is going to significantly impact his jungle clear speed. Although his base damage has gone up, it's not really going to be, I think, counteracted hugely by the change on his attack speed in the jungle, especially as he starts to get more stats, because he's not going to be able to stack as quickly, and therefore his jungle clear speed will actually be affected for the majority of the game. Leap strike damage is going up to compensate. Empower base damage is going up by 10. What I would say about empower base damage is that because it's on such a low cooldown, that's going to that 10 damage is going to feel more impactful than one might think from a simple 10 damage increase, because the cooldown of that ability is quite low. So therefore you're going to be able to spam it more frequently. And the counter strike cooldown is also coming down to compensate. Now, I think Jax jungle might still be playable, but just we would really need to like. I maybe overreacted at the start of the discussion there. It might still be playable, but it is going to severely impact his clear speed. However, Baron lane Jax is going to benefit massively from this. So if you like playing Jax in the Baron lane, you're probably going to be quite happy with these changes, because overall they are net positive for you. Realistically, right now, Jax is kind of getting a buff everywhere but the jungle. Hello, mate. What's going on? I'm trying to do my patch notes. What would you like? Oh, your nanny's coming soon. You want to go on a walk? Yeah, we'll go on a walk soon. Let Daddy do this this patch notes, and we'll go on a little walk. Jhin. We've seen that Jhin sucks, and Jhin has been sucking a lot. So they're going to increase the damage out from bouncing on his dancing grenade. So he's going to get quite a significant jump up in damage on the bouncing grenade. Now, what I will say is that you're really only going to see the major impact of this if you're able to bounce it on minion waves massively in the middle of the laning phase. This will not hugely impact his teamfight capabilities, because it's very rare that you get a bouncing grenade that dances from one champion to the next. But this will impact his ability to trade in lane a bit more effectively if you set the minion wave up correctly to use the bouncing grenade. What's going on, Arthur? And Deadly Flourish root duration is going up as well to 2.25 seconds. That's actually quite a big increase for Deadly Flourish. It's a little bit like the Veigar Cage increase. However, it's a lot harder to hit than Veigar Cage, and also it's only single target. So it's a nice increase, but it's not, not deal breaking. Karma, apparently OP, and I think kind of agreed. She's very high tier in competitive. Inner Flame, which is her damaging abilities, going up by 10 mana cost, which is in the early game quite significant. Yes, we can all hear you. You've got something coming out your nose. And her Inspire Shield is coming down by actually a really decent chunk, 30 in the late game. So that's 30 base shielding coming off in the late game on Karma, which is actually a significant amount when you think about it, especially when you're looking at the empowered shield, which affects multiple people. So, I still think Karma will be good. She's got a hell of a lot of utility in her kit, so I still think she'll be strong. And that shield, that 300 base shield, is still really good. It's just that she's not going to be quite as oppressive in terms of shielding as she was before, which I personally felt was the strongest part of her kit when it came to what she was capable of. This is really interesting, this change to Leona. Leona is getting another increase on her Zenith Blade range by 0.5, and her Solar Flare range is going up by 1 unit entirely. So if you remember, probably about a year ago, maybe close to a year ago, Leona had a Zenith Blade range increase from her base release. Now that's going up again, and they're increasing her engage range with Solar Flare, which is going to allow Leona to engage from much further ranges away and also get onto her target much more readily. I think the consideration here is, are you still, if you use a max range Solar Flare, are you wanting to talk? I'm not sure everyone's going to really appreciate you grabbing the microphone and making horrible sounds, my darling. You think it's funny? Can we give you something else to grab? What about this? You like jumping on this, don't you? So if you use a max range Solar Flare, are you going to be able to close the distance quickly enough to use the Zenith Blade? Because the Solar Flare range is going up further than the Zenith Blade range. So that's the interesting thing to kind of think about. I think you will. Absolutely. If you land a really good Solar Flare, I think you still will be able to close the distance nicely. But if you land the slow part of the Solar Flare, can you still get into range before they're able to escape? That's another question. But either way, some good changes for Leona, because I do think she's undervalued in this enchanter meta, because she has got one of the most consistent single target engages in the game, and she's incredibly tanky naturally, which is difficult to get from a lot of tank supports. I'm looking at you, Nautilus. Despite Nautilus having really strong single target engage, he's not actually as innately tanky as Leona. Lux, Prismatic Barrier, the second part of Prismatic Barrier, so when it comes back on its way back through, is getting a base increase of loads, by the way, absolutely like 25 in the early game, but then up to like nearly 60 in the late game. Yes. And it's getting a 10% ability power increase, which is pretty insane, and I think that's going to really spell either a return of support Lux. We might even see a little bit more mid lane Lux, which is already getting some play in competitive. So I think this is potentially a way back in for support Lux here, because that shield increase is massive in the early game and actually even bigger in the late game as well. Sorry, Bubby, I'm not sure everyone wants to hear your nails scratching on the microphone, so I'm going to have to move that over. Nautilus doesn't have a picture, doesn't deserve one apparently. His dredge line width against units is going up by about 33%, and his width against walls is going slightly down. So it's going to be slightly harder to hit a wall, but slightly easier to hit targets. They're also increasing his jungle clear speed with Titan's Wrath. Oh, you scratched my neck. Which actually, he already clears pretty quickly, in my opinion, in the jungle. The only problem is Titan's Wrath is such a long cooldown ability that it takes so long to get it up between camps that actually his jungle clear speed is completely gated by Titan's Wrath cooldown, in my opinion. Because otherwise you just don't clear the jungle quickly enough. But anyway, it might be good if you use it sparingly on the really big camps that you can kind of get through the jungle in good time. But we'll see. I definitely really appreciate the dredge line range increase though, because it did feel quite hard to hit a lot of the time, if I'm honest with you, which might make Nautilus a bit more consistent as a support. Nasus is apparently too OP. Maybe Hell's Devil was right the whole time, but they've specifically said lower elos, which I can kind of understand, because it's difficult to understand how to shut down Nasus. But they're increasing the Siphoning Strike cooldown in the early game, unchanged in the late game. So by the time you get to level 7 or 6, you shouldn't really, 7, I think. By the time you get to level 7, you shouldn't really, no, it is 6. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, 7. By the time you get to level 7, you shouldn't feel the change. It's, oh my God, little man. He really wants the microphone. I know you really want the microphone. I know you do. I know you do. You can't have it because Daddy's talking to everyone. Daddy's talking to everyone. Do you want to tell them about the patch notes? Rupert, what do you think about Nasus's Siphoning Strike cooldown increase? Okay. What do you think, Arthur, about Nasus's Siphoning Strike cooldown increase?
He doesn't talk.
He can't talk yet, can he, darling? No. Pike. Pike is, I would say, pretty underwhelming just in terms of the fact that he's quite hard to use. I actually think he's actually pretty strong as a champion, but I just think he's very hard to use and people are kind of finding it difficult to use him effectively. His base attack damage per level is going up by nearly 1, so he's going to have almost 15 extra AD at level 15 naturally, or 14 extra AD at level 15 naturally. His bone skewer damage is going up by 10, so it's a small amount of increase there. And his phantom undertow damage is going up by a significant amount, making it much more effective in team fights. And the armor penetration for stun duration ratio is going up. So you'll find that actually you're getting a pretty significant boost to the stun duration that you get from phantom undertow, which is going to be pretty exciting. So some nice changes. Hello, we can hear you. Do you want something to play with? What can I find that's safe for you to play with in my office? What has Daddy got that's safe for you to play with? This remote control that I have no idea what it does. Here you go. You want to play with it? I don't know what the buttons do. You want it? Yeah, you can play with it. Or you can eat it. Eating it is also good. So Riven is very OP, actually. I think I underrated her really heavily in my last tier list. Her base health is going up, and her base health regeneration is going up, but they're massively reducing her shield that she gets from Valor. It's going to be down by 45 in the late game, which is a pretty big base shield nerf in the late game on Valor. Because they increased the duration on it as well, which made it harder to break. I still think Riven will be good, by the way. I do still think Riven will be good, but 45 base shield nerf in the late game is a pretty significant amount, and you know that's 1 or 2 basic attacks that no longer need to get blocked. So still think Riven will be good, but just not as good. The fact that she's losing 30 base at the start, though, will affect her lane trading, and it will massively affect her jungle in terms of how much damage she can tank, and have a healthy clear speed. I think that the 30 in the early game is more impactful than the 45 in the late game, if I'm honest with you. Okay, trying to do this with my baby boys is especially this one. Grumpy, aren't you? Yeah, baby brother. Set is getting buffed. He's getting bonus AD ratio per 100 AD, so he's going to get slightly higher AD ratio on his Haymaker per 100 AD, if you can get 100 AD. And Facebreaker cooldown, which is his pull, is getting a 1 second reduction on cooldown. I think Set's pretty good. I've had some really good Set games recently, so I'm going to be happy about this change. I will happily accept any buffs to Set, because I already think he's in an okay spot. So I will take these gladly, if I'm honest with you. Big Shyvana rework. Okay, I talked a lot with this Stu about this when we were kind of discussing the patch notes. Essentially, Shyvana no longer relies on killing specific dragons to get her upgrades. Okay, Poppet. I know. Ow. Right. Instead of relying on dragons, she can get them from clearing the jungle. So she'll get a large monster kill, will give her 8. Champion, which I think large monsters only count as blue and red buff, although correct me if I'm wrong, as long as I don't know whether it counts as like the big monster of each individual camp, but that would strike me as a little bit OP, but I don't know. Worth it to test. Champion takedowns are going to give you 12 per stack. My goodness, mate. Rift Herald and Baron Nashor kill stacks will give you 12 as stacks as well. And Dragon kill stacks will give you 35. I'm going to quickly go get him a bottle, guys. 1 second. Okay. Dad has fixed the situation and we are ready to go again. Basically, you get stacks for large monster kills, champion takedowns, Rift Herald and Barons, and then Dragons still give you the most stacks. So Dragons give you 35 stacks in total. So you need a 100 to get an ability upgrade, and it upgrades from Q, W, E, and R, or first ability, second ability, third ability, and then your ultimate. I actually don't even remember if Shyvana gets an ultimate upgrade. I mean, that shows you how long I've played her. But either way, you get your ability upgrades in sequence. What I will say, actually, I don't think you get an ultimate upgrade, do you? Either way, I have no idea what's going on. Either way, it is actually, you probably won't be able to get your first upgrade by the first dragon unless you're getting a lot of kills or assists before that dragon comes through. Because I think you're only going to get about 2 clears of your jungle done, which is going to give you 32 stacks. And then you're going to have 35 from the dragon, which won't give you 100. So it's not going to guarantee you an upgrade by the time the first dragon rolls around this time round. However, throughout the course of the game, obviously it's going to guarantee you an upgrade at some point. It's not supposed to make it so that Shyvana is like guaranteed to get upgrades every game. It just means that you don't need to get dragons to get your upgrades. However, it is going to be significantly very difficult to get your upgrades without a dragon. I actually think some of the stats or some of the figures they've put here for large monster kills and champion takedowns are quite low, because to get just one upgrade, you're going to have to be involved in 10 kills, like at the absolute minimum. Well, actually, no, nine kills. But either way, it's still quite difficult to get that just from the champion takedowns alone. So I think it's still going to be quite hard to actually get your upgrades on Shyvana this time around. I think they might end up buffing those figures a little bit, because you'll find that a lot of games Shyvanas are going to struggle to even get one upgrade, because if you're not actually getting the dragons, it's going to take you forever to get your first upgrade anyway. So it's like you have to rely on the dragons regardless. But either way, it's a really good change. I just think maybe the numbers are a little bit too low. You'll have to let me know what you think, though. And also let me know if Shyvana upgrades her ultimate. I can probably Google it, but I'm doing this right now, and obviously I'm a little bit preoccupied. I just can't remember if she upgrades her ultimate or not. But either way, getting 4 upgrades would seem almost impossible, even with the dragons, to be honest with you. So, and 3 upgrades, 300 stacks. The maximum you're going to get before Elder Dragon from dragons is about 115 or 105 stacks, right? So all 3 dragons are only going to get you enough stacks for 1 upgrade, and then it's just about how many kills you're involved in. Because the max you're going to get from Baron Nashers and Rift Heralds by the time the Elder Dragon spawns could be 48. So then you're going to rely on jungle clears, and you're going to rely on kills and assists to get you over the rest of the mark. So it just feels like the numbers are a little low. But maybe they'll do some tweaks on them just to see how she plays out. I think if you let her upgrade her abilities too quickly, she's going to be a little bit too OP. And Arthur's gone to sleep. Singed has been a powerful pick, and basically Rhyalized buffs made him really OP. They're reducing his base health, and they're reducing his duration of his ultimate by 7 seconds. 7 seconds on the duration of his ultimate, which is about what? Probably in the region of about 25-ish%. So that's a big decrease to his ultimate duration, which is, by the way, the health regeneration and movement speed being the key things there. The movement speed specifically, that's 7 seconds less of him running around like a maniac. So that's a pretty big nerf, I think, to Singed overall. And that's the one that I think he's going to feel hardest out of all of this. Singed was still, in most situations, a bit of a counter pick. Not everybody was playing him all the time. At least, in my games, I saw him very rarely at Master and Grandmaster Elo. But in competitive especially, he was a really strong counter pick to certain matchups. Teemo is about to become a little wad of poo. I can't swear because I've got the kids around. Blinding dart range going up by about 10%. Guerrilla Warfare channel time cooldown's going up, but the channel time's going down and the mana cost is going up. But it just means you'll be able to go invisible a little bit more quickly. So the efficiency is going to go up a bit. And then the Noxus Trap explosion radius is slightly coming down, but instead of putting a little mushroom cloud around the mushroom when you proc it, it's now going to be like PC, where it's just going to deal damage to you for a set amount of time, no matter how far or close or far you are away from the trap. And trust me, it is the most obnoxious ability in the game. You're going to have sweepers when there is a Teemo in the game, and you're going to have to be conscious of walking into every single brush, especially if Teemo gets like a Rhyalized and a Leandry's procced up. It is obnoxious. I really hate this ability. It's one of the least fun designed abilities in the game ever. It's fun for Teemo players. It is not fun for anyone on the enemy team. It is honestly my least favorite ability in the whole of League of Legends and Wildrift. Whoever designed this ability should feel very bad about themselves, because it is not fun to play against. Kind of fun for Teemo to play it, I suppose, but not fun to play against. Who wants to just randomly walk around the map and then just lose half your HP to a Teemo mushroom and suddenly you're useless for the next 3 minutes, whatever, when you're going back? It's dumb. Dumb ability. Hate it. I like the Wildrift version that they had, because at least it felt like if you hit a mushroom, you could get out of it and not die. Now you're just going to die. Don't worry. Just special made-up characters. Yeah, don't worry. Twisted Fate. He's basically AD Twisted Fate was a problem. His base AD per level is going down, so you're going to get about 13 less AD at level 15. And your wildcard AP ratio is getting a 5% increase, but this is the big change. The attack speed that you get from stacked deck is getting nerfed by 15% in the late game, which is a pretty significant attack speed nerf. Not that you can't play AD Twisted Fate anymore, you definitely can, but They clearly would prefer you to play AP Twisted Fate, and a 5% AP ratio on wild cards is a very minor compensatory buff to say, sorry, AD Twisted Fate should never get played. So yeah, it's an interesting one. Varus is apparently also too OP. Piercing Arrow cooldown is coming down in the early game, but up in the late game. But with generally with Varus, you build quite a lot of ability haste, so I'm not expecting this to be a huge deal breaker. So I really don't think that this is a massive nerf to Varus overall, and you might feel it a little bit, but I wouldn't imagine you're going to feel it a huge amount. Blighted Quiver. Passive on hit damage is going up at every rank. Rupert, just be careful where you're kicking your foot, my darling. Thank you, my love. And the passive on hit damage for 6 seconds after using Blighted Quiver is going up as well by a decent amount. I think on hit Varus is a nice thought. The problem with on hit Varus in wildrift is that, well, with lethal tempo it could maybe be a thing, but the problem with on hit Varus in wildrift is we just don't have Gwynsu's Rageblade, which was the key item that was used, by every on hit Varus player in League of Legends PC. So I think like it can work, but it's probably still, if you want to play that type of champion, you want to play an attack speed on hit type champion, there are just better champions to play than Varus for that role. However, I'll be interested to see if this is enough to bring him in line with maybe some of the other traditional lady carries, and whether a traditional lady carry build that revolves around lethal tempo can be played with Varus, because that'll be the one, right? Veigar was too OP, so they're nerfing the most irrelevant stats to make Veigar exactly the same as he was before, but just a little easier to kill. Look, Veigar sucked versus assassins already, right? You might have seen, or you might see on my channel in the next few days, Veigar matchups where I pick Zed or Fizz. Like, those matchups absolutely crush Veigar. He's so bad versus assassins already. They've just made him worse versus assassins. He's still going to one-shot you. So Veigar's still fine. He will still one-shot you, and he will still be annoying with his cage. It just makes him slightly easier to kill for things that could already kill him pretty easily anyway. Although I will say, some of the item changes that are coming up will make Veigar a slightly less safe pick. Wukong can now jump over walls with his passive. Wukong was already pretty good in the Baron lane and was coming back in the jungle in a big way. He was played a lot of during icons. This is just going to make Wukong a little bit more OP. He can now jump over walls, which is going to make his gank patterns harder to read. And yeah, Wukong, I think, is going to be a strong jungle pick this patch, as well as a strong Baron lane pick in general. Xin Zhao. Apparently, 3 Talon Strike was too OP, so they're nerfing the cooldown by 1 second. I don't think it makes a huge difference. It's 1 second on 3 Talon Strike is annoying, especially in the early game. But as the game progresses, it's not going to be a big deal breaker for me. So, I'm not going to go through all of these champion cooldown changes, but what you need to know is basically every champion in the game is getting a cooldown buff on their ultimate, because they want people to have their ultimates up more frequently, which means some of the thematic changes they made around champions like Galio and Evelynn, where they thought their ultimates were up too quickly, has all been undone so that everybody's ultimates are up more quickly, which means that you can fight more often and play around your ultimates more often, because they really want everyone to fight in Wild Rift. Like, ultimately, Wild Rift is supposed to be based around skirmishes and team fights. That's what the fun of Wild Rift is compared to PC. You don't have to wait as long to start bashing people on the head. So by reducing the ultimate cooldown for everybody, you can bash people on the head more quickly, which is kind of what they're after, I think. But I'm not going to go through all the changes. The TLDR is that everyone's had their ultimate cooldown reduced, either by 20 or 10 seconds or thereabouts in that region. It gets a little bit less ridiculous in the late game, but everyone's first level ultimates are getting, cooldown changes so that they come up more frequently, so that you can bash each other on the head more frequently. And this makes up the majority of the pages on this Wild Rift document. But yeah, some big cooldown ultimate changes for most people in the game. And you'll find that your ultimates will be up more frequently. It means that you can play around them more frequently and expect to be, people forcing fights and looking for team fights more frequently. However, there have been some changes to certain champions that I think have actually been quite significant nerfs. The conversation or the discussion around this has been with the cooldowns, the ultimates coming off cooldown more frequently. We want to make it so these ultimates last less long, so it doesn't feel like there's as much uptime between your ultimates. I think the design philosophy is not correct, because what you're really doing here is you're just straight up nerfing all of the champions that are in this list by a pretty significant amount. Riven already got nerfed in the patch notes, and now she gets 3 less seconds to use her ultimate. That's 3 less seconds in a team fight situation where she can use her broken wings, or the second part of her, or Blade of Exile, second part of her Blade of the Exile cast, and she can use and she can have the empowered AD. She's literally just got three less seconds of empowered AD. Doesn't matter how frequently that ultimate cooldowns up, because in my eyes, the only difference maker in terms of ultimate cooldown uptime is if you were able to cycle it twice in the fight. But you're never going to cycle it twice in the fight. Rivens are almost always using Blade of the Exile, once in a fight, and then by the time the next fight rolls around, they have it up again. So by nerfing the duration, you're not reducing the uptime. You're just making it worse in team fight situations. Like my philosophy on this is that ultimate duration only matters to the point at which you use the ultimate. No one is using Renekton's ultimate, for 15 seconds and then having that off cooldown again for another fight. No, it's going to go on cooldown, and then you're going to use it again for the next fight when it's relevant. By reducing the duration of it, you're just making them worse. So it's a nerf to Renekton, it's a nerf to Nasus, who got a double nerf this patch, it's a nerf to Riven, who got a double nerf this patch, and also Rengar getting a nerf in the late game to how long he's in Thrill of the Hunt. These are all direct nerfs to these champions. And in my eyes, uptime on ultimate doesn't actually matter, because you're only using it once per team fight most of the time. You very rarely having these elongated phases where you use the ultimate, the fight keeps going and going and going, and then you get the ultimate up again. That to me is the wrong way of looking at the way the ultimates are used. But that's just my personal opinion. I just think that the end result is that you basically just nerfed all these champions, because 3 seconds is like 1/5 of the ultimate time on all of these guys. Like, it's like 1/5 of their ultimate is now just gone that they can't use. But maybe I'm salty because I'm a big Renekton enjoyer, but ultimate uptime to me doesn't function in the way that they're describing in the patch notes. And usually, look, I think the majority of the changes to the Wildrift dev team make it really good. But in my eyes, this one doesn't actually make sense, because ultimate uptime to me only matters in the periods in which you're using it. To basically justify it by saying, well, their ultimate cooldowns are shorter. Well, who cares? There's going to be a separate team fight by that point, so there's no crossover, in my opinion. But there we go. It's just my thoughts. Earth changes. Sorry, I can't focus on the earth changes. We've got too much to get through. New items. 1 second, I need to pause to get a drink. Okay, so still got a sleeping baby, which is good. The new enchants. Magnetron enchant. TLDR, you jump to a nearby ally within 5 range, and you dash to them and taunt the closest enemy champion within 2 range for 1 second. So it's only one enemy champion as far as I'm aware, and you taunt them for 1 second. You can only taunt one enemy per activation. The taunt only affects champions, and the taunt duration is reduced to 0.5 seconds if the enemy has been taunted by the Magnetron enchant in the last 10 seconds. So to stop you stacking Magnetron enchants on top of each other, now you technically could go 5 Magnetron enchants and just like keep taunting the same enemy, but it's never going to happen. It's an 800 gold enchant as well, so it's pretty significant. I would say this is probably going to be useful for one of two purposes. Either for peeling for your AD carry, so if you're like a tank support like Alistair or Leona who wants to jump to the AD carry to save them in certain situations, like imagine Zed, and you time it when Zed uses his ultimate, you taunt him immediately, you lock him down, and he doesn't get the damage down using his ultimate. This is one of those things that you can use to help your AD carry out. Or jumping to an ally that's engaged and then using that as a way to close the distance and use an ultimate. Someone like a Moo, for instance, might find that useful. Do I think this is going to get use? Yes, I do. Maybe. It depends on the situation. You've got to remember that these enchants are competing with the current enchants that we already have for supports. That being Proto Belt and that being Redemption, being the two major ones, as well as Locket that often gets picked up as well. You've got to remember that this will probably only have limited scenarios where it's going to be really useful, whereas you're going to always get use out of Redemption. Redemption is almost always useful. Locket is almost always useful, and Proto Belt is almost always useful in some way, shape, or form. Whereas this has more niche use cases. So you just have to think about the use cases in terms of it's an expensive enchant. It's the same as Locket, and it's more expensive than Redemption. Not more expensive than Proto Belt. We'll get to that in a minute. And it has limited use cases. So just got to think that it's okay, but it is competing with currently very good support enchants. Repulsor. Knock back enemies within 3.5 range to 3.5 range away from the caster. So it'll always get you to 3.5 range away from the caster. Yasuo cannot use this to get his ultimate procced, and the total cost is 500 gold. This is an extremely niche enchant. I actually don't think this is going to see a huge amount of use. The ideal use case for this is either AD carries that are appealing for themselves, like you can block Lee Sin Qs, you can stop jumps from Wukong, you can stop jumps from Kha'Zix, you might even be able to stop Evelynn jumping on you if you time it correctly. However, it's quite user dependent. It's going to be quite hard to make it work all the time. The other use case is a tank engage support who wants to knock people back towards their enemy team after engaging. But then I almost always would prefer Protobelt because it gets me in range for them more quickly. So, again, a relatively niche enchant. I don't know how much use it's going to get. The fact that it's cheap helps. Definitely worth trying out. But I'm just not entirely certain how much use this is going to get. Veil enchant. This is basically like targeted reflex block in Vainglory, for any of my Vainglory fans that are still watching. Grant a nearby ally a spell shield for 3 seconds that blocks the next enemy ability. You cannot cast it in yourself. It's also cheap. As mentioned, basically like a targeted spell shield. I can see this being relatively useful on Yuumi, who'll be sat on a target that basically she can activate a spell shield for them. But again, competing with things like Redemption, competing with things like Protobelt, there is still lots of things out there that this has got to compete with. And again, this only blocks one ability, and that is, I think, limited use in my opinion. So, and it's really going to be a support item, because you can't cast it on yourself. So it's going to be a support item. If you can cast it on yourself, it might compete with spots for things like stasis. But right now, I think limited use cases, I'm not sure how viable it's going to be because it is only one ability. Imagine you get this wrong and you block an Ezreal Q. That's 45 seconds of a completely wasted enchant. Boots of Swiftness are getting changed. They're going to Boots of Fura. So the movement speed is coming from 50 to 40. And you're no longer getting slow reduction. However, you're basically getting the Phage passive on your basic attacks. So anybody that doesn't use Phage, so any AD carry, for instance, that doesn't use Phage, this is going to be a really, 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 really good set of boots, and I think could even be probably the new go-to boots for pretty much all AD carries. I think it's going to be a really, really strong set of boots to have in the current meta. Fimbulwinter, shield range modifier going from 70 to 50%. The only thing that I've seen that makes me think that this happened for a reason is I've seen Senna Seraphine lanes go double Fimbulwinter and just never die. I don't know if you guys have seen that in your ranked games, but I've only seen it very infrequently. But maybe it's Riot having seen that crop up as a trend and they're just nipping it in the bud before it becomes super relevant. Gargoyle enchant is, I don't know why the enchants are just randomly below some of the item changes, by the way, but this is just the notes that we got given. Gargoyle enchant. Basically, I think it's kind of getting nerfed because I think Gargoyle enchant was actually frequently used in pro play and frequently used by tanks.
Oh, it's the milk.
Your milk's in the cup there, my love. No longer grants you extra base health. Actually grants you a shield that absorbs 30% of your maximum health that decays over 4 seconds. The shield value increases by 100% if there are more enemies nearby. You deal 40% less damage for 30 seconds. So basically, it's a great way for a tank to engage and get a huge shield and buy some time. Definitely good for big engagers, but ultimately, I actually think this is worse than what we had previously. I think the previous enchant was really strong, especially for certain people like Set, for instance, that really liked it. But regardless, it will still be a good enchant for tanks, and I anticipate that if you're a tank player, if you're not going Protobelt for the engage potential, you're going to want to go this because it still fulfills that same niche that Gargoyle enchant did. Protobelt's going up by 300 gold to 800 gold because again it was a little bit too good for 500 gold. It had way too many use cases. Hullbreakers randomly. I think they put it in alphabetical order. All item changes. That's probably why. Hullbreaker's too good on ranged champions. So basically, it's getting a nerf on ranged champions. You're getting a reduced half armor and magic resist if you're ranged, and you're getting minions are getting less armor and magic resist, also halved if you're ranged. This, I think, will nip this ranged Hullbreaker meta in the bud because those are not good enough stats for the quality of the item. You'd much rather go for one of the other items for the gold that you're spending. And it's supposed to be for melee champions. Like Hullbreaker is supposed to be for melee champions. So this is a good change in my opinion. Quicksilver, interesting change. No longer breaks you free, but grants you immunity to crowd control effects for 0.5 seconds. It's not a long period of time, but it gives you a bit more of a grace period to work with. Grants 30% tenacity and 30% slow resistances. It also, I think, stops you from getting knocked up if you time it before the knock-up happens. This enchant can still be used while under the effects of non-knock-up crowd control. So I think this can still remove you from current CC, so current crowd control. It still removes you from, unless it's a knock-up. If you use it before the knock-up happens, it stops you from getting knocked up. So the only thing you have to be aware of is if you're against like a Malphite or a Yasuo and they throw their tornado or they try and ult you, if you use this, you won't get knocked up. But if you're knocked up already, it won't free you from being knocked up. But should free you from all of the other. It should free you from the rest of the things that it previously did. Shadow enchants have gone. Spooky ghosts, bye-bye. So people like Akali and Evelyn are going to be really happy because those were ways that you were able to reveal them in certain situations. And Stasis, this is a big change. Stasis is going to 1,000 gold. That's a lot of gold. Now, the discussion point here is that too much gold that it's not going to be used as a tool? Well, in my personal opinion, no. I still think Stasis is unfortunately going to be the de facto defensive enchant for many, many, many ranged carries. Because ultimately, there is nothing else that does what it does. It's 2.5 seconds of total immunity. You can't get that anywhere else. So it's a lot of gold to invest in Stasis. But Stasis is still, I think, just going to be like, if you guys follow League PC, but Stopwatch, people used to buy and sell Stopwatch all the time. It is a broken effect. You're going to be paying more of a premium for it, so assassins are going to be super happy because they're going to have a bit more time in the game where they can take advantage of no stasis. But ultimately, I don't think this is going to stop Stasis from being a meta enchant. You know, reducing the time on it maybe, but 200 gold, you will bite the bullet for what is probably still just the best enchant in the game. But it'll be interesting to see if any of the other enchants do come in, but I just don't think any of them offer the same consistent form of immunity and defensive capabilities that Stasis offers you. Where are you off to, darling? You're going to get a banana? Okay, my darling, do you need Daddy to peel it? Okay, we'll bring it to Daddy and he'll peel it. Sorry, my throat. Right. Give me a second. I need to take a quick break from my throat again. This video has taken me cumulatively about 3 hours to film. Luckily, we had some banana delivery by Nanny, so now we got a banana for Rupert. Okay. Conqueror. Big changes to Conqueror. You're no longer going to get 10% melee and 7% ranged bonus adapted damage, which was a pretty significant thing that you had with Conqueror. That was the whole reason that Conqueror was good. You're going to get you're going to get an increase in maximum adaptive damage, so you're getting a slight increase in damage, which is quite nice, but obviously doesn't really make up for the 10% increase that you got as a melee champion. However, you're now getting Omnivamp, 8% Omnivamp and 5% ranged Omnivamp, which means that, there'll be some use cases where that's really good, but you've got to remember that 8% is about the same as like a fully stacked or like almost fully stacked Hunter Vampirism, so it's not like it's an absolutely huge amount of Omnivamp that you're getting. There are some champions that will use this. Obviously, there are some champions that don't really have a choice, but I imagine things like Fleet Footwork or Grasp of the Undying, etc., will become a bit more readily used. But people like Yasuo, for instance, would still use Conqueror. I would say people like Riven will still use Conqueror, for instance. Maybe even people like Darius. But it definitely is going to become less oppressive as a rune and probably open up more other viable rune choices for champions that do have the option, for instance. Fleet Footwork is getting nerfed in the jungle, so the reduction in healing that you get for hitting a minion is also going to apply to monsters now. Didn't apply to monsters in the jungle beforehand, so you're going to get reduced healing, from Fleet Footwork now. Grasp of the Undying is getting an absolutely turbo buff. They're not changing the maximum health scaling, but they are giving it 20% attack damage and 10% ability power scaling. And they're also making it slightly less effective on ranged champions, I think, to compensate for that 10% ability power. But Senna is going to get a lot of value out of this. This is going to be absolutely a Senna rune. Any tank in the top lane that builds AD is going to love this, like the Garen build of Black Cleaver and Sterak's Gauge. Put this directly into my veins. Grasp of the Undying set could definitely become a thing. it's a really, really, really strong rune now for a lot of bruisers. You might even see like people like Darius, for instance, go for Grasp of the Undying because it just has that attack damage scaling. So very, very cool to see that rune change, and I think it will shake things up. I mean, Grasp of the Undying was still used, right? Especially in bruiser versus bruiser matchups where you knew you were just going to be slapping each other on the head. It was still getting used, right? So it's going to make sense. Kraken Slayer is moving from on attack effects to on hit effects. So anything like Mystic Shot and Fiora's Lunge, that are abilities that apply on hit effects, now can proc Kraken Slayer, which is quite nice for some of those champions, especially people like Ezreal, who no longer really have a good rune to use. And the base damage is also going up, only by 14 in the late game, so it's not like it's going to suddenly become an absolutely insane late game rune, but it's definitely going to be a little bit more effective. Matey, what are you looking at? What is going on? But yeah, definitely going to become another viable alternative to Conqueror for sure. Is there something up there that's quite fun to look at? What are we looking at? Is it the light? Could be the light. Brutal is getting changed because it is essentially used by quite a lot of people because it's de facto it's a good rune that doesn't really have many drawbacks. And they don't want to nerf it for the jungle because obviously Brutal was used in the jungle, so there's going to be some jungle changes that we're going to talk about afterwards. But it's going to change from gain bonus 7 attack damage or 14 ability power to basic attacks deal 7 to 14 bonus physical or magic damage on hit champions. But it does mean that AP champions that don't basic attack are no longer going to get any use out of Brutal, and it's really going to apply to champions that it's really only going to apply to people that frequently basic attack. Also, you do need to be aware that it no longer applies to monsters or anything, basically. So it's only against champions, which means it's going to be basically useless in the jungle. So you're not going to really want to run Brutal in the jungle if you're a jungler. So basically, they knew that Brutal was really important for clear speed in junglers, so they're increasing the damage that Smite does, so it's going to be 50 per 5 seconds rather than 30 per 5 seconds. Gromp is going to have a base health nerf, and health per level going up. Red Brambleback is having a base health nerf, but a health per level going up, and Blue Sentinel is having a base health nerf, but health per level going up. Basically, early clear speed will be probably similar for most junglers, but obviously the more items you get, the more the healthier these camps are going to become. We've heard your feedback around wanting to more focus on the laning phase, so this is some pretty big turret changes, by the way. From 0 to 4 minutes, mid and Baron lane turrets gain 90 armor and magic resist. From now it's to 0 to 3 minutes, mid and Baron lane turrets gain 50 armor and magic resist. From 0 to 4 minutes, Dragon lane turrets gains 40 armor and magic resist for 4 minutes after the game starts, to basically being completely removed. So basically, Dragon lane's getting all of its armor and magic resist removed, and it's getting an armor and magic resist reduction on the mid and Baron lane. However, all turrets have plating has been removed, so now only outer turret platings have been removed, which means you're not going to get a massive snowball in gold for taking the second tier tower. Often what you'd see as Baron laners like Jax would just go and take a tier 2 tower and get an absolutely massive injection of gold. That's no longer going to be the case. Turret duration is going to be from 0 to 6 minutes 30, so you only have the first 6 minutes of the game to actually try and claim this turret gold, which also means that you can no longer snowball crazily off towers. And it's actually going to go from 3. It's now going to go from 3. Baby boy, I just want to finish my video, and we're so close. We're so close, aren't we, baby boy? We're so close to finishing it, aren't we? Yes, my darling? Nanny's gone back to see Granddad. 3 to 5 plates. The plates are still saying 150 gold per plate, so now the outer turret is going to be worth 300 gold more in terms of plates than it was before. But the local gold is going up on every single tower. And actually, the inner tower is getting 200 more gold. So actually, no, there will be some gold snowballing for local gold for inner turrets, but obviously just not quite as crazy as it was before. The outer turrets gain bonus magic resistant armor based on health status. When basically as the plates go down, they're going to get increased armor and magic resist, which is going to make the last 2 plates quite difficult to take. So the 160 and 240 armor and magic resist plates are going to be quite difficult to take. Turrets gain additional bonuses for multiple enemy champions near it within 3 minutes of the game start, to within 6 minutes 30 of the game start. So basically, this is going to that bonus is going to persist past 3 minutes. 2 champions is going to be 10. 3 champions is going to be 50. 4 champions is going to be 150. And 5 champions is going to be 250. It's going to be slightly easier to knock the early plates off with more champions, but obviously as the plates go down, they're going to be basically the same, I'd say. Monkey. I know you're grumpy. Do you need? What do you need? What do we need? What do we need? Do we need to do little? We need to do little. Oh, we need to do little roundabouts. We need to do little roundabouts. Whoa. You need some food. Daddy's nearly finished. Oh. More drink? Okay. Trinket changes. Using a trinket will cause different wards placed by that trinket to despawn. So using a yellow despawns your pink wards or your red wards, and using a red ward despawns your yellow wards. There we go. You can change enchantments as well. So you don't need to sell your boots to change enchantments. There is just going to be a little bit of premium gold to pay. So the cost of swapping is the cost to buy the same new boot and new enchantment wait a second. The cost of swapping equals the cost to buy the same new boot and new enchantments minus the gain of selling your current boots plus enchantment. Oh, so basically it's basically like you were going to do the same thing anyway. You would sell your boots and rebuy it with the enchantment, but now you can just do it without having to sell your boots. Get it? Cooldown when swapping enchantment. After swapping, the new enchantment will be placed in a cooldown state, where the cooldown equals 20% of the enchantment's maximum cooldown versus 100% of the enchantment's current cooldown. If the player has used it before and it's still on cooldown, taking the greater value of the two. So basically, there'll always be a cooldown on the enchantment when you swap it. It'll either be 100% of the cooldown that you currently have, or it'll be 20% of the enchantment's the maximum cooldown, whichever one is going to be greater. So it's interesting. Right. That's everything. There's a load of cool skins and there's a load of cool accessories. But apart from that, I think we've covered all the major details. And I did it whilst managing 2 children at the same time. Win. Right. I'll see you soon, guys. Really, really cool patch. Very excited for it. And I hope you enjoy it.